The air in my childhood home always felt thick with unspoken expectations, but tonight it was a suffocating blanket woven from silk and snobbery. The annual winter gala, or as my mother preferred to call it, the family annual review, was in full swing. Crystal chandeliers dripped light onto polished marble floors, reflecting the forced smiles of relatives I barely recognized, but who always seemed to know exactly how much or how little I was worth. I stood by the antique grandfather clock, an uncomfortable relic in a room buzzing with life, much like myself. My suit, borrowed from a distant cousin who was 2 sizes larger and infinitely more successful, felt like a costume. Every stitch screamed imposter. I watched my brother, Leo, hold court in the center of the drawing room. He was the golden child, the prodigy, the embodiment of everything my parents had ever wanted. His laughter, loud and confident, echoed through the vast space, punctuated by the admiring chuckles of our aunts and uncles. He spoke of his latest venture, a tech startup he'd launched, with venture capital that seemed to magically appear at his beck and call. My own ventures, small, meticulously planned forays into freelance web design, felt insignificant, almost embarrassing by comparison. "And how's our quiet one doing?" My Aunt Margaret's voice, sharp and laced with a faux sweetness, cut through the polite murmur. She always found a way to single me out, to remind everyone of my place. I turned, a weak smile plastered on my face. She was flanked by my mother, Eleanor, whose impeccably coiffed silver hair and pearl necklace gleamed under the chandeliers, and my father, Richard, a man whose stern eyes could dissect you with a single glance. "I'm doing well, Aunt Margaret. Keeping busy." My voice, usually deep and resonant, sounded thin, almost a whisper. "Busy." My mother's perfectly sculpted eyebrow arched. "Is that what we're calling it these days? I heard you're still working from that little apartment." "No, don't tell me, the one with the leaky faucet you complained about last Christmas." Her words, delivered with a saccharine smile, were a subtle knife twist. The little apartment was my sanctuary, my only real possession, a place I'd poured my meager savings into. "It's a place of my own, Mother," I managed, my cheeks growing warm. I could feel the gazes of our distant relatives, their silent judgments weighing on me. They weren't looking at me, they were looking through me, seeing only the empty space where ambition and success should have been. "Of course, dear," she curred, her eyes flitting over my suit. "But don't you think it's time you aimed a little higher? Leo's just bought his 3rd property, you know, a penthouse in the city. Imagine!" My father, who had been silently observing, cleared his throat. "Mark, son," he said, his voice a low rumble that commanded attention, "your brother is a man of vision. He sees opportunities and he seizes them. What about you? Are you still dabbling in those computer things?" "It's web development, Father," I corrected, my voice barely audible. "It's a growing field. I've been building a client base, focusing on long-term contracts." He let out a dismissive scoff, a sound that resonated with years of disappointment. "Client base, contracts, sounds like glorified freelancing to me. When are you going to get a real job, Mark? Something with a pension, something that brings stability. Your brother, for instance, has just secured a multi-million-dollar deal. He's making us proud." My eyes instinctively found Leo across the room, his back to me, basking in the glow of adoration. He was everything I wasn't. Confident, charismatic, effortlessly successful. He never had to prove himself. He simply was. "We just want to see you happy, Mark," my mother added, her tone oozing concern, but her eyes held a different message. They held pity, and something else, something akin to embarrassment. "We just want to see you happy, Mark, and secure. A man your age, still living that way, it worries us." The words hung in the air, a public indictment of my life choices. I wasn't just being criticized, I was being exposed. Each word was a brick, building a wall around me, isolating me from the very people who were supposed to be my family. I felt a familiar hollowness in my stomach, a gnawing ache that had been my constant companion for years. It was the feeling of being an outsider, even in my own home. A cousin, who'd never held a job longer than 6 months, piped up, "Yeah, Mark, my uncle offered me a position at his firm. Great benefits, good pay. Maybe you should look into something like that. It's not too late to get on the right track." His words, seemingly innocent, felt like another jab, implying I was lost, adrift, and in need of guidance from someone even less accomplished than myself. I wanted to lash out, to scream that my life had meaning, that my work, however unconventional, was fulfilling. But the words caught in my throat. What was the point? They wouldn't understand. They never had. Their definition of success was a narrow, rigid path, one I'd consciously chosen not to walk. And for that, I was forever condemned. I muttered an excuse about needing some fresh air and retreated to the dimly lit garden, the sounds of laughter and clinking glasses fading behind me. The crisp night air offered little solace. I leaned against a cold stone pillar, my hands clenched into fists. The humiliation burned, a hot, searing flame that consumed my insides. It wasn't just the words. It was the entire atmosphere, the collective dismissal that had been my constant companion since childhood. But beneath the burning shame, a different flame began to flicker. It was a cold, hard ember of resolve. They saw me as weak, as a failure, as an embarrassment. They didn't see the long nights I spent honing my skills, the satisfaction of turning a blank screen into a functional, beautiful website. They didn't see the small victories, the quiet triumphs that fueled my spirit. They only saw what they wanted to see. And for the first time, that realization didn't crush me. It ignited something. A quiet, dangerous determination. They had no idea what I was truly capable of, and one day they would. The chill of the garden seeped into my bones, but it was nothing compared to the icy grip of their disdain. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, the hum of the party a distant, mocking drone. My reflection in the dark glass of the French doors showed a man I barely recognized, shoulders slumped, eyes heavy with a weariness that went beyond physical exhaustion. This wasn't just about tonight. It was about every slight, every dismissive comment, every time I was made to feel less than. I recalled my father's words during my college years, when I dared to suggest a major in creative arts. "Mark, be practical. Art is for dilettantes, not for men who want to make something of themselves. Look at Leo. He understands real value." Or my mother's constant comparison to Leo's effortless achievements. Even when I landed my first freelance project, a website for a local bakery, my mother had commented, "That's nice, dear, but Leo's already investing in real estate." Their words had always been blunt instruments, chipping away at my self-worth until I felt like a hollowed-out shell. A shiver ran down my spine, but it wasn't from the cold. It was a tremor of something new, something that had been dormant for too long. Anger. A quiet, simmering rage that had been building with every patronizing glance, every condescending remark. It wasn't a destructive anger, but a clarifying one. It sharpened my focus, stripping away the layers of self-doubt and shame. I had spent years trying to fit into their mold, trying to earn their approval, to be enough in their eyes. And for what? More of the same dismissive pity? I pushed away from the cold pillar, a new resolve hardening in my chest. I wouldn't seek their validation anymore. Their world with its polished surfaces and empty smiles, was not my world. My path might be unconventional, but it was mine. I would forge my own success, on my own terms, and if that meant enduring their scorn for a little longer, then so be it. The following months were a blur of intense work and deliberate isolation. I stopped answering my parents' calls, ignoring the clipped, disappointed messages my mother left. My social life, already minimal, became non-existent. I poured every ounce of my energy, every waking hour into my work. My small apartment, once a symbol of my perceived stagnation, became my sanctuary, my command center. I ate, slept, and breathed code. I devoured online courses, invested in new software, and spent countless nights hunched over my laptop, fueled by cheap coffee and an unyielding desire to prove myself, not to them, but to myself. The digital world became my canvas, my refuge. I discovered a passion for complex algorithms and user experience design, losing myself in the intricate logic of code. Each line of code I wrote was a silent rebellion, a brick laid in the foundation of my own empire. My initial clients, mostly small businesses, were satisfied, and their referrals slowly started to trickle in. I took on every project, no matter how small, seeing each one as an opportunity to learn, to grow, to sharpen my skills. There were setbacks, of course, late payments, demanding clients, the inevitable bugs in my code that tested my patience, but each challenge only solidified my resolve. I learned to troubleshoot not just code, but also my own emotional responses. I learned to be resilient, to pivot, to adapt. One evening, staring at a particularly stubborn piece of code, a thought struck me. What if I wasn't just building websites for others, but building something for myself, something bigger, more ambitious? An idea began to take root, a complex platform that could streamline a niche industry I'd observed during my freelance work. It was a bold, almost audacious concept, far beyond anything I'd ever attempted. The thought thrilled and terrified me in equal measure. I sketched out designs on napkins, filled notebooks with flowcharts, and spent weeks researching the market. The more I delved into it, the more I realized the potential. It was a massive undertaking, requiring not just technical skill, but also business acumen, something my family always claimed I lacked. But the seed had been planted, and it began to grow, slowly but surely, nourished by my quiet determination. My days were long, often stretching into the early hours of the morning. There were moments of doubt, of course, when the loneliness felt unbearable, when the weight of expectation, even if self-imposed, threatened to crush me. But then I would remember the look in my father's eyes, the pity in my mother's voice, the smug amusement of my relatives. And that memory, sharp and vivid, would reignite the fire within me. It wasn't about revenge. Not exactly. It was about defining my own worth, about proving that their narrow vision of success was not the only one. It was about showing them, and myself, that I was more than just the quiet one, more than just Leo's less successful brother. I was building something, and soon the world would see it too. The invitation arrived precisely 2 years after the last family gala, a heavy cream-colored card embossed with the familiar crest of my parents' estate. It announced Leo's engagement to a woman from a prominent family, a social event designed to be the highlight of the season. My initial instinct was to ignore it, to continue my quiet existence, but something had shifted within me. The man who had slunk into the garden that night was gone. In his place stood someone different, forged in the fires of solitude and relentless work. My platform, Nexus, had quietly launched 6 months prior. What started as a niche solution had rapidly gained traction, filling a critical void in its industry. Word of mouth spread, then industry publications picked it up. Investments, initially from angel investors who saw the raw potential, had multiplied. Nexus was no longer just my little computer thing, it was a force. My leaky faucet apartment had been traded for a loft overlooking the city, and my borrowed suit for tailor-made attire that fit not just my frame, but my newfound confidence. I RSVP'd yes, not out of a desire for validation, but for closure. This wasn't about proving them wrong. It was about acknowledging my own journey, my own triumph, on my own terms. The night of the engagement party was a mirror image of that other gala, yet everything felt different. The same crystal chandeliers, the same polished marble, the same scent of expensive perfume and thinly veiled ambition. But this time, I walked in with a quiet assurance, a strength that emanated from within. My suit, dark and impeccably tailored, felt like a second skin. My parents were holding court by the grand staircase, just as before. My mother, draped in sapphire, her smile dazzling, was introducing Leo's fiancé to a steady stream of well-wishers. Leo himself, looking every bit the triumphant scion, was laughing loudly, his arm around his future wife. As I approached, a familiar voice cut through the polite chatter. "Well, look who decided to grace us with his presence!" Aunt Margaret, her eyes scanning me from head to toe, her usual smirk firmly in place. "Mark, darling, we thought you'd forgotten all about us. Still fiddling with those little websites, are we?" Her tone dripped with the same condescension, the same casual dismissal. Before I could respond, my mother turned, her eyes widening slightly as they swept over me. The usual pity wasn't there, replaced by a flicker of surprise, then something akin to confusion. My father's gaze, usually so dismissive, lingered, a furrow forming between his brows. "Mark," my mother said, her voice lacking its usual saccharine tone, "you came." It wasn't a welcome, but an observation, tinged with a hint of uncertainty. "Of course, Mother," I replied, my voice steady, resonant. "Wouldn't miss Leo's big day." Just then, a distinguished-looking man whom I recognized as Mr. Harrison, a titan of the tech industry, approached our small gathering. He was someone my father had always admired, someone whose presence at any event signified importance. He bypassed Leo and my parents, his eyes fixed on me. "Mark, there you are!" he boomed, extending a hand. His grip was firm, respectful. "I heard you were here. I just wanted to congratulate you again on Nexus. What you've built, son, is truly revolutionary. We've been watching your growth very closely at Harrison Technologies." A hush fell over the immediate vicinity. My mother's smile faltered. My father's jaw, usually so rigid, visibly slackened. Aunt Margaret's face, usually so composed, contorted in a comical expression of disbelief. "Mr. Harrison," I replied, a genuine smile touching my lips. "It's an honor to hear that. We've been working hard." "Hard work pays off, Mark," he said, clapping me on the shoulder. "I've been telling my board for months that Nexus is the future. We'd be fools not to explore acquisition. Perhaps we could schedule a meeting early next week. My team is eager to discuss terms." The words hung in the air, echoing the chandelier's sparkle. Acquisition, terms, Harrison Technologies. The implications were staggering. My parents, who had always measured success in tangible, traditional metrics, looked utterly bewildered. Leo, who had just joined us, stood frozen, his confident smile replaced by a look of utter shock. "Acquisition," my father finally managed, his voice barely a whisper. "Mark, what is he talking about?" I turned to them, my gaze calm, unwavering. "Father, Mother, Aunt Margaret, Nexus is the company I've been building, the little computer thing. It seems to be doing rather well." I kept my tone even, devoid of triumph or malice, but the weight of my words was undeniable. "Mr. Harrison's company is interested in acquiring it." My mother looked as though she'd been struck. "But But you're just freelancing, she stammered, her voice laced with confusion. No, Mother, I'm an entrepreneur, I corrected gently, and it seems my work has finally gained some recognition. Leo, finally finding his voice, stepped forward, his eyes narrowed. Nexus? That's your company? Why didn't you say anything? His tone was sharp, almost accusatory, as if I had deliberately hidden my success from him. You never asked, Leo, I said simply, and frankly, it didn't seem like something that would interest you. A faint, almost imperceptible tremor ran through him. For the first time, his usual composure cracked. He wasn't looking at me with pity or superiority anymore. He was looking at me as a competitor, an equal, perhaps even a threat. Mr. Harrison, sensing the shift in dynamic, gave me a knowing look. Well, Mark, I'll leave you to your family, but do call my office first thing Monday. We have a lot to discuss. He nodded curtly to my stunned family and departed, leaving a palpable silence in his wake. The room, which moments before had buzzed with the celebration of Leo's achievements, now felt charged with a different kind of energy. All eyes were on me. The whispers had started, not of pity, but of curiosity, of sudden, dawning respect. My relatives, who had once dismissed me with a wave of their hand, were now staring, their expressions a mix of disbelief and reassessment. My father cleared his throat, his face a complex mixture of pride and bewildered regret. Mark, I had no idea. My mother, her pearl necklace suddenly seeming less impressive, reached out a hand, then withdrew it. Her eyes, usually so critical, were now searching, trying to reconcile the quiet one with the man standing before her, a man Mr. Harrison had just acknowledged as the future. I looked at them, truly looked at them, and realized something profound. Their validation, which I had craved for so long, no longer mattered. Their opinion, once the measure of my worth, was now irrelevant. I had built my own foundation, brick by painstaking brick, in the quiet solitude they had imposed upon me, and in doing so, I had finally found my own strength, my own voice. "There's a lot you don't know, Father," I said, my voice calm and clear, "but that's all right. I'm fine with that." I offered them a small, genuine smile, not of defiance, but of liberation. The heavy blanket of unspoken expectations had finally lifted. I was free. I turned and walked away, not to the garden's cold embrace, but towards the open doors, towards my own future, leaving the stunned silence of the past behind me.